Hello! Alright, so just fiddling with volume levels, making sure everything looks and sounds good. I think we're alright. I did a couple minor adjustments to go ahead and increase the volume. I thought it was a little bit quiet yesterday. And I think maybe I have a good balance. So at the moment, I'm just going to hop over to Twitch, make sure everything looks good there. Alright, and it'll be just a moment while I go ahead and hop into the manager. You'll see I have the warmer light back. And while I did not prefer it, at the moment it's preferable to fighting with that other light. I'm just trying to pull up the manager here. Sorry about the wait there.
You can't jump when you're fighting.
Finding the settings. Somehow I forgot where it was. There it is. Alright. There we go. Alright, and the bitrate looks a teeny bit low, but everything is in green, so that's a good sign. Alright, so I'm focused generally over here because today's prompt is book. And that is, while that is the main focus for this particular stream, I'm also going to be jumping back to do some more details on the Jabberwock because I didn't get too much more done than like some initial glazes and highlights. So definitely want to hop back over there, pop in some more detail. You know, if time allows, I'll go ahead and pop over to the flamingo, add a little bit more dimension, because we did initial washes there, but not really any shading. So, kind of felt that staying with that that Halloween soundtrack from yesterday was not very ominous. It's definitely the brighter side of Halloween, which I don't mind. My mood varies. So we get a little bit of everything here. Alright, so for this book, it is another one of those absolutely tiny little things in this scene. So I'm probably going to stick with our two round number ones, the Silver Sterling Studio 6000S and the Princeton Velvet Touch. Both of those are number one rounds, but you'll see that they do actually vary quite a bit in size, and hopefully getting that to focus. I tend to use the Sterling one to do more blocking in. It has a pretty fine point, but when I want to go in there with even smaller detail, I tend to grab that one. I actually have a whole brush cup over here that I had picked and chose from a bit ago, which, oh, there's my detail brush. Yeah, I think for today, we might even bring out this guy. I have an 18/0 spotter from Princeton Velvet Touch, and I have a, I keep the plastic caps. When you have absolutely teeny brushes, those caps are going to save you money, because these itty bitty little points are so easy to get bent and distorted. please protect your brushes. They are an investment, and you know, if you're just constantly buying new brushes before their time, you're pitching a good bit of money out the window. But I will actually go ahead and add a little bit of text to the book, or at least the impression of text on this book, because it is such a tiny detail. I have the curtain open to allow more light in, just in general, because of fighting with this light for so long. So I've just left it as is. The book is fairly light already. I'm just going over a couple little details that went up a teeny bit darker. So just blotting with the eraser, pull up a little bit of the graphite. I'm actually going to tamp on the pages themselves a bit. The pages will be significantly lighter than the spine. And I want that to appear correct. Alright, and just to make sure we don't have any skewings from the eraser, I always give it a quick brush. And I'm going to go in with the Princeton round one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab just a touch of the raw sienna, and I'm going to very gently outline these pages. So that way you guys have some detail to see. And because I'm a little further from the work because of the camera's position, going back to the reading glasses, I think these are like a 1.5 magnification. They might be like a 1 3/4. Oh, there it is. 1 3/4, so 1.75 magnification. But it's handy when I do miniatures to go ahead and pop in a lot of detail without dealing with so much eye strain. So it's one of those proactive things I recommend if you're going to be staring at anything that is tiny for a while. Let's go ahead and get some readers. They're over the counter. You can get them at the dollar store. That's where these came from. I'm not spending a bunch of money for glasses unless I actually need a prescription. But I find it best to just preserve your eyes and deal with less headaches. Because, I mean, who does want a headache from staring at some tiny details? I feel like I have the tiniest little fuzzy that's gotten captured on this brush end. So just giving it a quick rinse and blot. And grabbing a bit more of the raw sienna mix. Raw sienna is a very softly granulating paint in this line. Just to give you an idea as far as some of the granulating properties, this is the swatch sheet from my old palette. So this column here is raw sienna. These mixes are, let's see, leaning less heavily on the raw sienna, so I'll show you the other column. I do my swatch sheet a little bit differently than you tend to see a lot of online artists doing. So one row of the mixture is probably like a 2-to-1 ratio of the color, and then the other row is a 1-to-2 ratio. So that means like this side is heavier on the raw sienna than the other row. The other row is heavier on the colors that it was mixed with. I like doing that because it gives me a little bit of a better idea as far as the range. And then I also do the shading, so I have an idea as far as like mass tone versus a gentle wash. So I get a better feel for the colors overall. That's something, if you guys are interested in, definitely let me know in the comments, because I can show you how I go ahead and set up these mixtures and do a mixing chart. It's a little time consuming, but for one, it's pretty. Just having it sitting on the desk, like seeing all that color is isn't inspiring. It's why sitting at my desk is kind of a happy place. And for 2, it's very practical, especially when you're getting to know your colors. So you can see here in the cobalt teal blue and in the Andanthrone blue how the raw sienna pigment has settled. And if this were a cold press paper, it would be even more exaggerated. This one is, I believe this one is a not rated paper for whether it's hot or cold press, because it's the Canson XL watercolor pad. It's a reasonably priced paper, especially when you're starting. It is cellulose based. That, for me, because of the sizing that they use, actually wound up being so much easier to lift color than using some of the more professional papers with cotton. Though, on the other hand, cotton papers do tend to stay wet longer, so if you're doing larger washes, you're going to have more time to get that done. And also, you're able to scrub the paper a little bit more to go ahead and try to lift it. Cellulose papers don't put up with that so much. Like, once you get through that sizing, you're going to be kind of shredding your paper a bit. So anytime you're trying to lift, do it gently. Take a couple tries at trying to lift. Go and wet it, blot with the paper towel. That all helps absorb some of the moisture as well as some of the color. So anytime lifting, it's a process. Just give it time. Alright, I have a pretty wet mixture of the raw sienna. It's because I'm not trying to do something that's too bright. Alright. Trying to position this over here. Or hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Actually, it doesn't look like I'm having issues with autofocus right now, which is nice. So, with this line work, clearly this is an old book. And I'm doing some gentle lines here just to indicate that this is a bulk of pages that we can see from this top angle here. We'll give that a moment. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just do the very edge of the book's spine that we would be able to see from here. And since this is going to be such a dark area, because the shading for the rabbit hole will be here, we could do really any color we want. I'll probably use sepia for the background to give it a really nice, deep, earthy brown. I'll probably pop in maybe a little bit of quinacridone burnt orange if I feel that it needs to be tipped even warmer, to go ahead and indicate maybe some like ridges in the earth where the rabbit hole had been dug. And I'm feeling like a deep red for this book. So I'm actually grabbing some of the Purely Maroon. I like to use that as a shadow color on my red sometimes, and also in this situation, since this would be such a weird low light area, I think it is enough that it'll still contrast well.
McDonald's, get over here because there's free McDonald's. Just kidding, I lied.
So we have the two covers of the book. Just kind of straight lines. Very gently, a little bit at the edge of this one, since the pages look like they've lifted up a little bit, and you can see that little edge. And then the spine itself. The spine itself is like a C shape with the center part of the C kind of pretty flat, and then you have the two curved areas where they attach to the covers. So That's what we're doing with our hardbound book here.
Why? You can't do that.
Realizing it's been a little while since I've done any binding. That's an interest of mine, is binding books on occasion. Alright.
That's what you get. You'll die from this thing. Ha! You're gonna die. Ha! Die first. Ha! You don't.
Alright, and at any point, you're welcome to hop on and do comments, whether the video is live or in replay. I'm always happy to see questions, concerns, just general information about palette, pigments, and anything. Also, I like to hear your contributions to the conversations. I know I kind of ramble about a pretty wide range of topics. Right, so a quick hop over here on Twitch.
Now we don't have to look for low.
And just welcoming our viewer to the chat here. Alright, so now we have the pages just generally outlined, the book spine, and now we're going to add a shadow on the books. And for this, I'm going in with neutral tint and a hint of the quinacridone burnt orange. Just to go ahead and tone that down a little bit further. I do want to keep it in this realm of browns. Might actually define this area a little bit better later. And what we want is a little bit of shadow to help define this visually before I add any details as far as any print on it. I don't want to do a wash of shadow later and wind up obliterating that fine detail, so that's why we're doing this way. I don't want any chances of lifting. We're doing a teeny bit of shadow where the center of the book is, and then a little bit along the pages to help indicate the form of these pages not sitting flat. The book's just... I hate to see people holding books by the covers like that and just letting the pages flat, but that's kind of what's going on, as this book is just falling through the rabbit hole in some bizarre gravity going on. Alright, so that looks pretty good. We're going to... Actually, I already rinsed my brush. I'm going in just along these edges a touch. I'm gonna go ahead and soften the edges where the shadow is. And a quick blot just to pick that up. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. My schedule slightly evolved to a bit of randomness here and there. Oh, and I have a random blue spot popping. We'll go ahead and zoom in a touch. And you can see I got the most random little bit of turquoise over here. So I'm trying to lift that, and we'll see how successful that goes. Looks like that's alright. Alright, and then since we're still waiting for that book to dry anyway, I'm currently seeing how far over I can get to get this flamingo over. And then I'm grabbing the sepia. I'm going to mix that up pretty strong. And this is so we can go ahead and dot the eye. It's the same color that we were using for the bill, just to make sure that that was a bit of a warmer shade. I wanted a very subtle indication for contrast there. I still have a bit of the... forget if it was the quinacridone coral or some of the quinacridone rose from Emma Graham. Forget which one of those two was in this mix with the neutral tint, but I grabbed a little bit of that. It's still pretty thin, and the brush isn't super wet, but I wanted to go in and add just the tiniest hint of shadow. We'll do that along this edge. We're working with our shadow mix first. Grabbing a touch more of that. And that, working that a little bit too dry, so adding a little bit more water and letting that settle since it's already mixed. Like, it's not just neutral tint. This should do alright. Letting this watery mix go out a little bit further to go ahead and soften those edges. And grabbing a little bit more strength. Now this is further on the neutral tint side than it was the color mix. And we're just doing a gentle line along the top edge of this flamingo, and that'll let the pigment go ahead and blur up towards the end of the edges of that wash that I put in. Worst case, as I'm seeing it, it is a little bit of an edge forming over here. So we just rinse the brush, blotted it a little bit. I'm just going over this because I don't want this to be a hard edge. So much easier to lift those edges when they're already wet, but you can also soften them when they're dry like we did with the teapot. So you get varying ranges of ability to soften and lift depending on the pigment. With a lot of staining pigments, I know people kind of freak out about that, and it's not a problem if you're only trying to soften an edge as opposed to a full lift. Hold on. I'll be right back in just a moment. And thank you so much for waiting patiently there for just a moment. Minor situation here. Looks like everything has been resolved. And whilst I'm over checking Twitch real quick, I'm gonna skip this track. I don't know why that one's been a little bit too far. Alright. So, our flamingo has a little bit more dimension to it. Going to grab my spotter, that is that itty bitty little 18/0. It's a little harder to tell how much moisture it has because it is such the tiniest little brush. And here's where I'm going into the sepia. Just the tiniest little dot. Go ahead and give our flamingo an eye. Or at least a pupil. It does already have a little yellow eye. These are some of the absurd details. And likely I'll have to go in with that spotter. Go ahead and give just the tiniest touch of form for an eyelid. Itty bitty details. Alright, and now we can get back on with our Jabberwock. I am kind of tempted to add a little bit more shading to the flamingo legs, just for a touch more contrast. This is switching back to the number 1. That's a little bit too wet for what I need. Alright, we're leaving this guy alone. Back on to the Jabberwock, which for this I'm actually going to move the camera a touch and then see what I need to do to get the rest of this into focus. Just going to move where my light source is just a touch. This arm can only go so far across my desk, which is why we're moving the camera arm first and seeing what we need to do. Going in a bit further with the zoom, which is why I wanted to see how far that goes first. I need to move my brushes and pencil out of the way. A little further over to the side of my desk. The detail brushes on the side here. I can get to all of them, and I'm going to have a quick second just to get a little bit of a drink. Alright, so we have our Jabberwock here. You see the washes that I put on earlier have dried a little bit lighter. That's why I started going in with the secondary glaze. And to go ahead and give a little bit more detail and form, even though it's kind of a half and half whether these areas are in shadow or it was just a darker part of the Jabberwock. I'm kind of leaving that open to interpretation, so I am still popping in some details in places where you probably visually wouldn't see them if this were a realistic scenario. And I have minor fuzzy incursion here. Slightest little bit of hair sticking on my Payne's Gray, so I'm trying to get that out of the way. So I don't want to embed it. With Engram, they do use honey as one of the binders for their paints. That's why you'll see a lot of people who come from more humid climates tend to avoid them. I live in a pretty temperate climate without a lot of humidity, so I have not had any issues using this. I opted for their Payne's Gray on my palette for this time. I felt like it was a better shade for what I was looking for. I can just as easily mix some of the neutral tint and Indanthrone blue. But again, I like having convenience mixes. I don't want to spend all my time sitting here mixing colors. Alright, so in the Jabberwock, I did not get to the off-camera moment where I added more contrast behind the claws. So I'm going to see how well I can get that done today. Now that it has dried down a little bit further. I feel like there's a little bit more area that I can see. So this is one of those details, if I can't see it well enough from where I'm at, I'll skip it. And it's just in an area like this, I really don't want to have to break out more bleed proof white and do touch-ups if I don't have to. So that's basically what my option would be here, because the values are so dark in this area. I was really using the Payne's Gray to help push this area further back visually. Which is why I was using it as that silhouette color, because it is a nice cool tone. It's a touch darker than I'd like. Actually going to go back in with a bit more water to go ahead and thin out the pigment. I'm going to just drag that pigment up here. I probably will also need to blot it. We'll see how much I can thin this along the surface. This is a fairly watery wash, so I'm just kind of running right over the edges of that area. I'll do a darker wash to go ahead and indicate the, I don't know what you'd call them. They're not quite an antenna. Slightly glaze over the lighter areas of the pecs. Now lifting out some of the excess so we don't have pooling. Alright, and just going to darken up this little edge here. At this point the brush is really dry, so I'm just kind of lightly going over any areas, and this would add some texture wherever it does happen to grip onto the paper. And there is the tiniest fuzzy over here. Alright. Unscathed. Alright, so to add to our Jabberwock's fiery eyes, I'm going to do the lightest little bit of quinacridone gold. I could go brighter with the Hansa Yellow medium, but I don't know, I'm feeling like even though that they are fiery, that from this distance they wouldn't read as super bright. I went ahead and let that wash go over the whole of the eye. This may wind up lifting up the red that we used yesterday. I believe that was Deep Scarlet that we used yesterday for this. For the edges of the eye. I still want to articulate the mouth a little bit better, but I am feeling better now that we have a bit more shadow going on, giving the Jabberwock a bit more form. I've also noticed that this wash is giving me a hard edge here. I'm just gently going around and softening that. And we'll go ahead and give that a little blot, just gently. I could definitely glaze those eyes with another glaze of yellow. I went a little bit too light. I didn't even clean my brush from where I softened that edge, so this may be a touch more muted. But I'm not upset about that if it goes that way. Okay, so our Jabberwock's looking a bit better. At this point, we're going to leave him alone. We're going to hop back over to our book. And now I'm going to see how far I can adjust back over to our book here. Almost generally, I would not be trying to move back and forth quite so much during the stream. I don't like to do that much because I feel like it's a bit disorienting. Alright, and that's probably about as good as it's going to get for moving it back to the other side of the desk. Our book looks pretty good. Looks like those have dried pretty well. And now we're going in and with the teeniest little detail brush, I'm just going to mix up, probably stick with the sepia. And I still have a little puddle of that I was working from when I did the flamingo's eyes. But because the spotter brush holds so little, you can see from the... Oh, this is with water on it. It basically drowned the tip in water and didn't even blot it at all. You see there's almost no belly to this brush with the ferrule, like where the ferrule goes up to the tip of the brush. So this thing holds almost no pigment. I'm actually using a number 1 brush to go ahead and mix up our little puddle of pigment to be working from. I'm going pretty strong with the sepia here. It is a bit of a watery mix. So strong on the color. Enough where You might mistake this for like a puddle of soy sauce. Just to kind of give you an idea as far as strength of color and that it is fairly liquid. I should be able to get more than just a little dot out of our spotter brush here. Right, I'm going to leave a little square section empty. I feel like maybe we'll go with a kind of like the implication of a like an illuminated book page. And doing the classic little scribbles that you would tend to see for writing. Probably could have done these rows a little bit closer together. And now my debate is for what kind of illumination. Should it be a clear letter that's able to be spotted? And realizing now that I forgot to mute that tab. Alright, we'll be winding down from this book shortly. I'm just cleaning off that spotter brush. Even though I do like to use metallic pigments in my work, I tend to avoid it, at least for the initial scan. That way, if there's issues in scanning the metallics, I have a backup and I can kind of do some adjustments based on that. So we're going to just grab a little bit of this quinacridone gold. And this is barely picking up. I'm trying to re-wet a puddle with that spotter brush, which I generally avoid. Alright, so basically blotted in the impression of a square. And then I'm going to grab just a touch of green. And this may run a little bit. I feel like that implies that this was a little bit more decorated. I'll let that dry just a moment. And then we'll go in and imply more of a letter in our little illuminated section. I think I'm pretty good with the detail. Grabbing just a touch of the raw sienna again. That's to give this a teeny bit more depth. I feel like this side was a little bit short. Alright. we're getting pretty close on time. So at this point, I'm going to give that a moment to dry. I'm going to pull up what tomorrow's prompt is. That way we can be productive there before I go ahead and wrap up today. Alright, tomorrow is White Rabbit, so that'll be a fun one. I'll be really happy to get him placed in here, because his placement has definitely changed over time. You have to let me know how you think the book is turning out so far. I'm just grabbing a touch more of that sepia. Amazing, my room's not... I guess the room must be a little bit on the dry side, because the that puddle I mixed up of the sepia earlier has already dried up. So that should bode well for just giving the slightest indication of a letter for a little illuminated book here. I'm going to go with an A for Alice. It won't be as floral as illuminated panels tend to be. That's just because it's all of that is just implied because of that scale. So I'm pretty happy with our book here. I'm a little unhappy with the yellow cast from the light. I'm going to need to actually take a photograph to go ahead and adjust my camera's white balance, because I've been using the automatic white balance so far, and I believe I can photographically adjust this to be reading on the cooler side. But at this point, it is absolutely, there is a hardware issue with the light. At one point when I was pressing the button to increase the brightness when I was using it on the cool spectrum, it suddenly brightened up out of nowhere. I thought, okay, great, it did what it was supposed to do. I start, I take my hand off the thing for like 2 seconds, and suddenly it's already dimmed down to what it's been kind of using as like a, I don't know, general brightness. And you see, like, set on warm, it's just staying on. I don't have to futz with it. So, definitely hardware failure. Unfortunately, I'll be stuck dealing with the yellow light for who knows how long while I wait for the manufacturer to deal with a replacement. That'll be something that I'll get in process Monday, because business hours. But I'm really excited for the White Rabbit tomorrow, and we're going to see some more progress happening in Wonderland. So thank you so much for joining me today. We're gonna zoom back out just so you can see all of Wonderland. Alright, and we should just fit within frame here. Alright, and for a moment, I'm going to go ahead and drop off my top frame. And there you go. You can see all of Wonderland. I am very much looking forward to blotting in significant amounts of the background, because at the moment you're not getting a whole lot of that sense. I'm going to adjust the ISO a little bit lower so you can see the line work that's here.
So this is the secret hideout.
I think it is coming along nicely, but I've been feeling more and more urgency of, let's get some more color in this background. So I'm going to try getting ahead on that a little bit more, because I'm pretty sure that you guys would love to see just the chaotic splashes of color that have been in my head. Those will be a lot of fun to capture on camera. So, as always, thanks so much for joining me today, and keep painting. See you tomorrow.